Okay, welcome everybody. Uh, this is our Information Lab course, and we're going to be following this book here, which is called Predictive Analytics. It's a very exciting new field. There are many new programs popping up throughout the world, master's degree programs in this field, and we're going to learn about it. We'll be working with Excel, but not just Excel, but this book focuses on Excel, so we'll be focusing on Excel. I encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. It's not required, but it's definitely useful. Excuse me for a second. Okay, alright, so this is the book we're going to use. So let's start. So these are the this is the table of contents. So building a collector is about using Excel to automatically collect data from the internet. That's kind of a fun part, and that's how we're going to get data. And you're going to be able to use this technique to collect automatically data from not just the website that we're going to focus on in the text, but you'll be able to do it for various different websites, and that's how you will, that's one way that you will be able to do your final group project, is by using this technique to collect data from some other website. Okay, after we get the data, we're going to learn about different techniques for predictive analytics. And we start out with what's called linear regression, and forecasting with moving averages, forecasting a time series, and we're going to use a technique called smoothing. Smoothing basically time series. Let's see if I can get a picture of a time series. So this is called a time series. You can see down here this says day, and this is what is that? Can't read it. Let's see. It says gallons. So I don't know, maybe it's gallons of gas. So you can see that, like, on day one they used between 100 and 150, maybe this is 110 gallons of gas. In fact, it's actually 113. Then on day two they used 50 gallons of gas. You can see day two is 50 gallons of gas. On day three they used somewhere between 50 and 100. It's probably about 60, but no, it's actually 67. And on day 4 they used 100 gallons of gas. Actually, it's 98 gallons of gas, and so on. So this is the usage of gas over time. So that's called a time series. Now what smoothing is about is getting this kind of green line here to sort of, this is, we say that this is maybe the real path, and then there's kind of random fluctuation off of that path. So we want to find sort of, this is like a kind of a trend line through this data, and we use this technique called smoothing. So going back to the table of contents, we have smoothing and using regression. So here this is just regression in general, but this is regression for a time series. A time series means that the x-axis, we just looked at a graph with the x-axis. The x-axis is time. So in that example, the x-axis was days, so that's time. So whenever you have the x-axis as time, that's called a time series. And then we're going to learn about a technique called logistic regression, and the basics, and then further issues for logistic regression, and principal component analysis. And then we're also going to learn some other stuff that's not in this book. And we may get to this as well, Box-Jenkins, and maybe even this. I'm not sure about that. And here's a more detailed list of the table of contents. So this is chapter 1, building a collector. So let's look at what they talk about here. Planning an approach, a meaningful variable. So if we're going to be talking about data. We're talking about some variable, some somebody's age or the gallons of gas used or something that's a variable, so we want to find a variable. In this case, they're going to be talking about sales. Then they're talking about planning the workbook structure. That means planning. We're going to be collecting data using Excel. So Excel means it's a workbook, and we want to sort of set up the workbook so that it looks so we can collect it conveniently. The query sheets. Query means to in this case, query means a question. In this case, query means to question the website where we're getting the data. In other words, we're going to kind of sort of ask the website for data. So that's and we put that data. We put those questions on one of the sheets in our workbook. Summary sheets. So this is going to be where we're going to put our results of the when we do the collection of data. Snapshot formulas, more complicated breakdowns, and then he's going to explain the code, the VBA code that we use to do this, to query the database, or to query the website. I'm sorry, I might make that mistake often and call it a database, but in this case it's probably more like a website. Anyway, so we need some code. This is hopefully most of you have taken Visual Basic, and this is Visual Basic for applications, which is kind of an easier version of Visual Basic that you can use in okay, then there's more about this code here, and more code, and more code, and more code, and more code, and then talk about some sheets, and a little bit more about sheets and maybe some code in here. Okay, so that's where we're headed in our first class. I don't know if we'll finish chapter 1 in the first class or not, but that's what we're headed for. Okay, I'll stop here, and then we'll get started with building a collector.